I'm excited to give this talk. I'm Russ Gritzo, also known as Heisenberg. The title of the talk, and I understand I've got 30 minutes, normally this is about an hour-long talk. The title of the talk fits really well into a number of the conversations that we've already had, like in the panel session. The title of the talk is How Not to Suck in an InfoSec Career. Hint, it's not all about your technical skills, and that's really true. It is not all about the technical skills, and so this talk is not going to be a technical talk. This is going to be a talk talking about how people can improve their ability to work well with others and ability to succeed in a career and in life, talking about how you do healthy self-contemplation, how you connect with others, and how you how you communicate and what your conduct is. So those are the kinds of things that I'm going to talk about today. So contemplation, conduct, and connection. And we'll go ahead and jump into some of the topics. You've heard a lot about the different diversities of incomes, or diversities of how you came into the cybersecurity field. In my particular case, it was gamma ray spectrometry, which was my gateway drug to becoming a hacker. So I've been a practicing scientist, I've been a cybersecurity white hat hacker, and currently private pilot and glider flyer, and I also am a consultant right now. So I've got a wide range of background. And also, if you look, as you're looking up here at me in the audience, you notice that I've got a little gray, okay? I've been entering well into my 7th decade on the planet. And with that has got some interesting things that you learn. And that's one of the reasons why I really am excited about sharing some of this stuff. Because as I sit down and I reflect on it and I think back, I've known a lot of people, okay? I have known the awesome and I have known the disaster. You don't work in a place like Los Alamos without knowing some really awesome people. You don't work with a bunch of pen testers without knowing some really awesome people. You don't hire people at a place like Los Alamos or at a pen testing team without knowing some really awesome people. You also get to know your fair share of train wrecks. And especially the train wrecks are the ones that are in my mind as I'm sitting here talking about these particular things. And my favorite saying that I like to talk about when somebody comes to me and says, oh, I'd like to get into the pen testing, I'd like to get into InfoSec, I'd like to blah, 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 blah. And they say, but I'm not really sure I can do it. I say, you know what? I can teach an adult how to pen test. I cannot teach an adult how not to be a jerk. If you have got the right mindset and you've got the technical chops and you've got the determination, you're the person for me. I can teach you how to pen test. So, now let's get this out of the way. Let's get this slide out of the way. You gotta know some technical stuff. You always gotta start at the beginning, right? You gotta know some technical stuff. Understand what you're good at. Are you a generalist or a specialist? Whatever it is, go with it, run with it, endorse it, and pursue it with passion. I can talk about some of these things, but I've got a limited amount of time. If you want to talk more about what kinds of advice I would have for people who are just getting into it, come hit me up. But let me talk for a minute about passion. There was a moment that was absolutely galvanizing in my early technical career. For anybody who went to college in engineering, the first year calculus class, the first semester calculus class was the lead-out class, right? That's the one where they separated all the engineers from the liberal arts majors, right? So that was a class. And I sucked at math. I was terrible. I was sucked at all kinds of technical things. I was sat in that class, and in walked the professor. He's this beady-eyed guy with this wild bulb, with this wild bowl of hair and gray, munching on this sort of stumped out cigar, wearing a serape with a motorcycle helmet under his arm, and a calculus book that he literally had rubber bands around to keep the pages in. And he walked in and he looked at the class, he opened that calculus book, and it was like he was sharing the secrets of God. It was so amazing because his passion for what he did absolutely fundamentally changed my life. And I'll tell you this for free, if you're talking about pursuing technical things, you've already heard about mentoring. If you're a mentor, mentor with all your heart. If you are being mentored, tell that mentor how much that person means to you, because that can be huge. All right, let's pivot to fermions. Now, there's two types of fermions. There's leptons and, oh wait, that's sorry. Different talk. Okay, the focus of this talk is going to be on the soft skill. How many of you want to go back to the fermions? Right. Okay, contemplation, conduct, and connection. You've got to have an effective balance, and I'll tell you these three work together. I hope to show you that. Why? I hope to show you why and how in a minute. Contemplation. You got to know who you are. And you've got to go and constantly benchmark who you are. And I'm going to keep looking at the time. And it's hard to balance between this. This community tends to attract a lot of narcissists. So you have to have a balance between narcissists, all about them, all about, their hyped up ego and that sort of thing. But there's also people that are the egoists, right? There's the people who really have no contemplation about themselves, and they're really only looking externally for any kind of a clue. You have to find a balance of this. This is hard to do because nobody has an objective view of themselves. But I'll give you a few hopeful hints as we go down the road. Let me say this, and this is particularly important the older I get. You are not going to be okay if you can't take care of your health. There are some things that are just you're never going to get past it. I mean, things will happen to you. You cannot pass up on any opportunity to take care of your health, physically and mentally. If you're not okay mentally, you're not going to be able to cope, and you're not going to be able to work with those around you, and you're going to have a hard time succeeding. And one of the things that I can tell you about, actually I'll save that to the next slide. You have to actually spend time on this. And this is where the balance between narcissism and egoism really comes into play. You have to have a healthy recognition. There are times when you have to pour your energy out. Got it. There are times when you have to stop and rest and recover, whether that's physically or whether that's mentally. Those things have to happen. The people that I have seen that are the most successful have healthy self-confidence, and they deal well with setbacks. And I'll get to the financial well-being thing here in just a minute. This dealing well with setbacks, this is really hard. I mentioned earlier that I'm a private pilot. As it turns out, this interesting thing about being a private pilot is your success is really measured on how well you can land the airplane, right? If you land the airplane in a bad way, it can go very badly. Early on in my pilot career, I had this issue where I kept starting to land the plane about a foot in the air, and it would drop onto the ground, and I was really irritated with myself. And one time the instructor, I landed and I took back off to go around and go do that again, and I was grouching about that landing back there behind him. He said, "That's over. That's done." It turns out aviation is a lot like life. It is going to keep moving forward inexorably. When you're in the airplane, you're moving forward. You don't have time to sit back and think about that landing that you made back there, except to look at it and say, I flared too early, lesson learned, captured it, move on, it's done. That is one of the things that you have to do, or else some of these things, or else some of the dwelling on prior mistakes is not going to go well for you. I didn't really know anywhere else. I built up to it better in a longer talk, but the financial well-being, take care of your financial well-being, because that is something that as you get older, that gets harder and harder. Takeaways. Maintain a regular practice of self-reflection. The priorities are physical and mental health, financial well-being, and then the others. If you lack in these areas, seek help. It is okay to seek help. Get self-help, get input from others, and get therapy from needed. Connection and conduct and connection will be impacted by this, and especially the connection. One time I had a person call me up and they say, "Hey, are you okay?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. Why? Why do you ask?" You are saying and doing things that are completely out of character. And I stopped and I thought, you know what? He's right. I am not in a good mental place right now. I am exhausted physically, and I'm not in a good mental place. I had an accountability group, an accountability partner that would take me aside and say, "Are you okay? If not, you need to spend some time with them." Find those accountability people. When you trust them, make absolute sure that you listen to those folks. All right, again, I'm sorry, I gotta move on fast because I don't want to end up missing some of these things. And I gotta really talk about all three topics because they tie together. Conduct. Conduct in this context means the actions, the things that you actually end up doing in the behavior. Now this is a huge topic area, but one of the things that I am going to focus on is primarily in the area of morality, guiding principles, truthfulness, being genuine, and these things drive your reputation. If you fail at these, your reputation is kind of in the toilet, and that's going to make it very difficult for you to have a really highly successful career. Here is this one slide. I'm going to actually pause. I'm going to really spend a little bit of time on this because of all of the topics, I believe in all three of these concepts or else it wouldn't be in this slide. Of all of these topics, this is the one thing that I want everybody to really sit down and think about. Your integrity will be challenged. It doesn't matter where you are in this career, especially if you're in a career of trust and a position of trust, if you're in a place where you have access to sensitive information, if you're in a government job or in a job where you have access to HIPAA or PII or something like that, I can absolutely promise you that your integrity will be challenged. And you have to be ready for it. Because what doesn't happen, and mark my words, this doesn't happen. You don't wake up in the morning and stretch and yawn and get your cup of coffee and then, you pull up the phone and it says, oh, by the way, a reminder, your integrity will be challenged at 2:15 this afternoon. That never happens. You're bebopping along, minding your own beeswax and doing stuff, and all of a sudden you find a serious mistake that you or somebody else made. And it could have absolutely life-changing consequences for someone. Now what do you do? Because the ramifications of that mistake are huge, and it's going to be painful, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be challenging. Where is your integrity in this? You're asked the question. I'm just going to pick a random person. He comes to me and he asks me a question. And I know what he needs to hear, and it is not a pleasant message. Do I tell him? I know what he wants to hear, but do I tell him what he needs to hear because I just want to be kind of easy and get through this? Someone shared something, he shared something in confidence with me, and she over there said, hey, I'm really worried about this guy. Can you kind of tell me where he's at? Oh, well, no, wait a minute. It would be a good thing because she's worried and she's actually genuinely concerned, but he shared some concerns that he's having because they were in confidence, and he shared them with me because he trusts me. Now what do I do? Where is my integrity in that decision? You could cheat the system here a little bit. How many of you guys are remote workers? Yeah, a lot of us are remote workers. How many of you guys could cheat the system and nobody would ever know? Where's your integrity in that? These things, your integrity absolutely will be challenged. So, let me give you a few, how you have, yes ma'am? I'm sorry? I have a little bit of extra time. I'm being told to chill a little bit. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Okay, good. All right. No, actually, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Practices to consider. How do you handle this? Because like I said, if you've got some of these circumstances that are coming up, you need to know how to handle it, and you need to be ready. Because as I said earlier, you're not going to have enough time to prepare and think, in this particular challenge, I will respond in the following way. That you're going to have to be ready ahead of time. Are there clear rules that you've agreed to? If there are clear binding rules that you have agreed to, if you have signed a rule of behavior, that's pretty clear. If you have signed non-disclosure agreement, that's pretty clear. If you've signed security clearance paperwork, that's pretty clear. You have very clear guidance that you need to fall down to, or that you need to refer to, and you know what you have to do. If somebody has shared something with you in confidence, you need to sit down and talk about that for a little bit and ask them ahead of time. Are you sharing this with me in confidence? Can I share this with somebody because I'm concerned about you? Who can I share this with? Is this okay? You have to be open and honest and transparent about it. and help others by telling them what is in confidence, and be consistently truthful. You heard in one of my earlier remarks, I talked about this accountability peer. This is something that I actually felt very strongly about, and I would actually encourage you, if you have some folks around you that you really trust, remember, you need to judge their character just like people are looking at your character. An accountability reference, an accountability peer, somebody that can look at you and you have given them permission. There were 3 people in my former company that I actually had this conversation with, and I said, you 3 folks, I talked to them individually, of course, but I said, you folks have the permission to take me aside and say, dude, you're crashing. And let me know that something is not right. Let me know that what I'm doing is not okay. Let me know that they are concerned about my behavior. I have those 3 accountability peers in my former group because, as it turns out, one of those guys called me and he was absolutely spot on. When that pays dividends, I cannot tell you how absolutely cool it is. So, takeaways. You're not going to be successful at this all the time. Nobody's integrity is 100% perfect. There's too much gray area. Do the best you can. I can tell you the times I'm most satisfied with the outcome is when I can sit down and say, that was incredibly painful, but at the end of the day, I can close my eyes and sleep in peace because I did the right thing, even though it was painful. Use your connections to help guide you and benchmark. Contemplate your worth as you come. Okay. I always tell this joke, and I rushed into it too fast. My handle is Heisenberg, okay? Heisenberg, Schrodinger, and Ohm this is all hard content, so we got to take a break here for a second. Heisenberg, Schrodinger, and Ohm were all out for a drive one day. Heisenberg's driving. He gets pulled over by the cops, and the cops comes up to Heisenberg and he says, hey, do you know how fast you were going? And Heisenberg says, no, but I know precisely where I am. The cop says you were doing 120 kilometers an hour. Heisenberg says, dang it, now I'm completely lost. The cop thinks, okay, this is kind of weird. He goes and he searches the car, he comes back and he says, you know you have a dead cat in the trunk? And Schrodinger says, we do now, you jerk. The cop has had enough of these guys, and so he decides to go ahead and arrest the group. Ohm resists. You saw that. Okay. I had another physics, I was working on another physics joke about Rutherford and Bohr, and I just kept chasing myself around the circle and couldn't get to the nucleus of the joke. Sorry. Okay. No, Anthony's over here chuckling. He gets it. That was a little bit, that's reaching for a little bit. Okay. Connection. Connection, I'm going to talk about your relationship with others, and it is a huge area, but one of the things that I'm going to really focus on is communication. Okay? You have to learn to communicate. You have to learn to communicate one-on-one. You have to learn to communicate written, spoken, and small groups. And a part of that is listening effectively. But let me focus on writing. I cannot tell you the number of technical people that have said, oh, I speak at writing. Sorry, personal opinion, old guy, I'm starting to get more and more opinions. That's not an excuse. You can get better. Your writing can be effective. You have to write stuff down. If for nothing else, you'll not always be you, right? Somebody is going to follow behind you and look at your work and understand what you did. You need to write it down. You need to be able to leave some kind of a legacy behind on that. Organize your thoughts, communicate them clearly and concisely, and remember, and this is the famous email problem, remember that the written word does not carry the context of the spoken word. You can see a lot, or you can tell a lot about what I'm trying to convey by looking at the context, by looking at my face. You're not going to get that out of my email. So you have to provide the context when you're doing the spoken word, when you're doing the written word. You have to learn to speak in a variety of situations. You have to learn to speak one-on-one. You have to learn to speak in groups. You have to learn to speak to those who report to you. If you're becoming a manager, you have to learn to speak effectively to those above you. A story about my dad real quick. One day when I was becoming a manager, my dad said, one thing that he realized as he wound up his career, he said that the people that worked for him thought much more highly of him than the people he worked for. And I looked at him and I said, that's backwards. That's just fundamentally wrong. And fast forward life, fast forward life, fast forward life, he was absolutely right. Because the point was that he was able to communicate, and the people that reported to him knew that he absolutely was there to support them. Not a pushover, but he absolutely was there to support him. He was a man that they could trust, they could communicate with him, and that he had their back. When he talked to the people above, it was the truth. It may not have been what they wanted to hear, but it was communicated respectfully, and not everybody takes that well. But as it turns out, I became a manager just exactly like him. Say what you're going to say it concisely, and stop. I can't tell you the number of times that people start talking and they go over and over and over, and they keep going and keep going and keep going, and then they go back to the original point, they re-emphasize the original point, and then they go to the dude, stop talking. Okay. Practice, few practices, few takeaways. Listen actively in a conversation. You're not listening to be able to give the retort. You're listening to try and understand what that person is telling you. Success is not just blurting something out with a degaff attitude, and I don't care what happens. Think about the message that you're trying to get to somebody. Ask, get feedback. Is this making sense? What do you think? How can I improve? Is this message coming across? What is the message you got? Oh, that wasn't what I intended. Let me refine it. Listen to yourself. This is actually something that's really hard. You know, the thing that just absolutely makes me cringe more than a really bad presentation is listening to my own presentations. I'm just like, dude. Organize your thoughts, say what you have to say, see how this message is being received. If it doesn't come naturally, work on it. All right, here's the final slide. So, all of these things are interesting, and I threw a lot of content at you in the last, 60 micrometers or so. By the way, a micrometer is about 32.5 seconds. You guys get that for free, there's no extra charge for that. As you're sitting there looking, each one of these things, the only way you can work this effectively is to take these three in cooperation with each other. Contemplation, how you self-analyze, is going to be actualized by listening to by having connection with people and understanding how you're coming across and being received by them. And by looking at your conduct. If your conduct is not who you are, that's because something's wrong up at that upper bubble. So those things work together. Same kind of a thing with connection. If you don't have the kind of confidence in who you are and understanding who you are, when you try and connect with a person, they got nothing to work with because they don't know who you are because you're not expressing your genuine self. And then if your conduct is not conducted with integrity, there's no connection there. I don't know about you, but if I can't trust somebody, I'm not going to open up to them. Same kind of a thing with the conduct. Mistakes will be made. Go back to the first bubble. Contemplate, where did I go wrong? And then fix that problem. And if you're sitting there looking and thinking, wait a minute, why is it that I can't make a connection? Maybe you should look back over here at this conduct bubble and say, am I the jerk? You know? And if the answer is yes, oh, guess what? You go back up to this first bubble. That's how these things all work together. All right. Thank you very much. I know this is not a typical InfoSec security con. Thank you for being with me. I have probably just a couple minutes, but I actually want to try and give a little bit of time back to the next speaker. Time for one or two questions or comments. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Here. Go ahead. It's on.
Okay. So the three C's, the conduct, connection, and contemplation.
There we go.
Yes.
Thank you.
So these are concepts, but they're about action, right? Like if you're in a room with other people but no one's doing anything, then there's nothing to contemplate, there's nothing to go on with. So I assume that you're actually trying to apply this like to your business work, to your private and personal life, like all that. Like how do you see this as being incorporated into those other parts?
How do you see this as being incorporated into the other parts? Yeah, I think I'm not quite sure not quite sure exactly how to answer your question. I see these as actions, yes, but I also see these things as fundamental concepts. Because it's very hard when you're looking at life and you're looking at your career and you're looking at how you're going to be successful. It's very hard to get a handle on these things, right? That's a very abstract concept. And so for somebody like me with an engineering background, I have to have, and going all the way back to the story of my math professor, I have to have a framework. I have to have a structure whereby I can sit down and evaluate these things. And this is how I've developed that structure. And that contemplation part is that part where I do indeed self-reflect, outside of what else is going on. And that part about conduct is where I am indeed benchmarking how the things that I'm doing are landing. And the part about the communication is indeed about that connection that I'm making with people. So I probably didn't really understand your question, but if you want to pursue it more, I'm down at Cyber Skills Labs, and so come down and let's talk, because it'd be fun to have a philosophical conversation. One more, and then I'm going to give these folks their mic back. One more. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. Here. If you want to, or just shout.
Suggestions for reading, inspirations from books or thinkers that got you into this subject.
Yeah, I'll work with the B-Sides organizers to give you the slides, because there is a lot more content that I didn't really get to go through. His question was, do I have any information about specific books or resources or guides? Actually, to be honest with you, I don't. I know there are a lot of books out on these various topics. I can tell you the most effective resource I have found is people who I respect that model this. When I find people that I respect that model this, I soak as much wisdom out of them as I possibly can. Now again, I had an unfair advantage. I worked at Los Alamos. I worked with some of the most brilliant people on the planet. Sorry, Cynthia, you guys got some really smart ones too. Okay, but that is really the secret. And going back to the talk about my math professor, I ended up taking every class that professor taught because I so valued him as a model to help guide. But that's an excellent question. Thank you guys very much for putting up with this talk.